Picking up the fifth-year option for defensive tackle Bryan Bresee was an easy decision for the New Orleans Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, and on today's episode, I expect the New Orleans Saints to be active in the running back market in this year's NFL draft. We'll dive into the Saints' success in rounds 3 through 5 since 2003. We're going to kick everything off with the biggest news of the week, the Saints picking up the fifth-year option of Bryan Bresee, why it was both an easy and good decision by and for New Orleans. We appreciate you very much, as always, being here with us. We got all of that and a little bit of Lagniappe for you on today's episode, so let's get into it. The Saints picked up Bryan Bresee's fifth-year option, and this was an easy and good decision for and by the New Orleans Saints. The reason why this decision was easy is because everything that we've heard about how this team feels about Bryan Bresee, who was drafted in the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft, is that they're very pleased with his development over the course of his career. He arrived in New Orleans as a first-round pick that had some injury history, that had a very good set of skills as a three-tech defensive tackle pass rusher, but was also somebody that needed to develop further in the run game. Since arriving in New Orleans, he showcased both sides of that equation while, for the majority of the time, staying on the field. Now, playing a 17-game season in 2026 will obviously be a big thing that you're looking for when it comes to Bryan Bresee, but appeared in 15 games just last year, and 2 years ago led the team in sacks with 7.5 sacks. Now, that was something that was expected from Bryan Bresee. The expectation was always that he would be an effective pass rusher from the interior. That's why they drafted him. That was why he was a first rounder as a defensive tackle, all of that. But what was known was that he would need to continue developing as a run stopper as well. That's where 2025 comes in. 2025 comes in, all of a sudden, he's no longer a three-tech pass rushing defensive tackle in an even front, which is what he did in Dennis Allen's system, meaning that you had four guys with their hands in the dirt, and Bryan Bresee was lined up at defensive tackle between the guard and the tackle over on whichever side. Could be the strong side, could be the weak side, just depends on if it's like an over or under front. It just depends on the play call in those cases. But that was his role. Line up in between the guard and the tackle, rush the passer. That's kind of specifically what he did in Dennis Allen's system. So he went from doing that to now being the interior end in a 3-4 system or in an odd front system, which still oftentimes consists of four guys on the line of scrimmage, but two are standing up. One is usually hovering in some way, whether shaded or not, over the center, and then the other moves around a bunch. And that player that moves around a bunch can sometimes be playing 5-tech, where he's lined up over the tackle, you look at Cam Jordan's first year as a New Orleans Saint. He was a 5-tech, lined up over the tackle run stopper, or just inside the tackle run stopper. But then he also lined up as that 3-tech and rush the passer, all that. So his role and responsibility, therefore, changed when Brandon Staley took over and changed what the Saints defensive front looked like, and he adjusted well to that. He registered his highest amount of run stops in 2025, according to Pro Football Focus, with 18. He also had the best average depth of tackle out of the two seasons as well. So average depth of tackle is how long a ball carrier, how many yards a ball carrier typically gains before you are involved in the tackle. For a defensive tackle, you really want that number to be as close to a yard as possible, but within 2 yards is considered acceptable, at least. He got within 2 yards. He got 2 yards last year in 2025. In 2024, it was 3.3 yards per tackle in terms of the average depth. So you saw him bring that down by over a third, and you saw him get into a little bit more of kind of the adequate level of expectation when it comes to somebody playing a run-stopping presence. Missed around 23% of tackles, so you'd like to see the missed tackle percentage creep back down a little bit, but was somebody that absolutely showed strides as a run stopper, and even though he only had 2.5 sacks, in terms of when he was asked to rush the passer, was just as effective, if not, maybe a little bit less effective doing that role as well. So now you're seeing both of these, the gap between being a pass rusher and being a run-stopping defensive tackle start to close. And now he's going to start to enter the conversation, if he can put that together for another year, of being a more all-around complete defensive tackle. And that's the conversation that you want to be in. That's the conversation that the Saints have seen when it comes to his development so far. Here's the other thing, and this is just a testament to where the New Orleans Saints are right now. They're not in a situation to where they're having to scramble and save money, because they have $76 million before this option was picked up for 2027. They had $76 million available, not $76 million over the salary cap like they typically are when we're talking about looking a year ahead. $76 million under the salary cap before picking up his fifth-year option for 2027. So they had the cap space to do it. They are not a team that right now is desperate for a need at this position, a need at that position, got to get the quarterback figured out, got to figure out wide receiver, got to build the offensive line, all these other things. A lot of their premium positions, wide receiver, corner, quarterback, blindside tackle, as well as edge rusher, there is a starter to play that role, right? It's not a situation where it's a big time need where there's no starter there. You're looking at, can you find better starters in some of those places? You're looking at, can you add depth in some of those places? Or with some of those positions where you have multiple roles attached to the singular position, i.e. wide receiver, right? You don't just have one wide receiver. You typically have three in today's NFL. Same thing for corner. You're looking for players to fill those other roles that are at the same position, but you have the starter at all those other positions. So it allows you to be able to go to your defensive tackle that you feel very excited about and that you feel like is headed in the right direction. And that is what the Saints feel. I can tell you that for a fact. It allows you to be able to go to that player and say, okay, I'm going to keep you around. You're on the fifth-year option. That doesn't guarantee, though, really anything beyond that they're willing to pick up the fifth-year option. Do keep this in mind as well. The fifth-year option right now is projected to be about $13.9 million for 2027. If you took that and put it into the APYs, or average per year values of defensive tackles in today's year, in 2026, this year, that would be 24th amongst defensive tackles. Bryan Bresee is indeed one of 32 starting 3-tech to 5-tech defensive tackle, interior defensive line players in the NFL. He is indeed one of those 32. He is going to be paid like he is one of those 32, number 24th at $13.9 million. That's fine. That's a perfectly acceptable amount of money to not even really commit to a player, but to put on hold for right now for that player, to keep that player around for 2027, keeps him under contract through that year. But before you even get to the fifth-year option, you can always work out an extension. This is something that the Saints are looking to do right now with Chris Olave. They picked up his fifth-year option. He's now on the brink of playing on that fifth-year option, which is not a disaster, not the end of the world. That could work out for everybody. But they're also interested in getting an extension done before he plays on that fifth-year option. You can do the same thing with Bryan Bresee. So even though the fifth-year option is $13.9 million, there's no guarantee that he plays on that figure at all by the time that you get to 2027, nor is there truly a guarantee that he's on the roster, right? Like, there's still decisions the team would have to make here. There could be a potential trade, all these other things. But as of right now, the Saints are showing that they are buying into Bryan Bresee and the development that he's had so far. The numbers really only mean, hey, putting this situation on hold for right now, buying themselves time, and then they can reconfigure some of those numbers and go to the negotiating table after this 2026 season. So we got that covered for you here. Now let's take a look at how the Saints have found success in the middle rounds of the NFL draft under Mickey Loomis. Let's get to that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and you know what that means. It's time to get in on the action over at FanDuel, because this is at the time that every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and of course, every game can swing a series. Right now over at FanDuel, you can get in on everything from Finals MVP to Finals matchup. You can even get in on games this evening. The Chicago Bulls heavily favored tonight against the Washington Wizards. Surprise, surprise. You also got the Toronto Raptors favored in their upcoming matchup. Lakers going up against the Warriors as well. So a ton for you to get in on over at FanDuel. And it's a great time to do so if you're a new customer, because right now you can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's only at FanDuel.com today. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Once again, that's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints have found some success in the middle rounds of the NFL draft since Mickey Loomis has been the general manager going back to 2003. Longest, I believe still the longest tenured general manager in the NFL up to this point. And of course, last year's draft class was very promising, and some of the fan favorites in this year or this past year's draft class were all mid-round picks. I'm defining mid-round picks just for the sake of this conversation for me, just to keep the research consistent. I'm defining mid-round picks as rounds 3, 4, and 5. The way that I think about it is that there's a first and a second round, there's a sixth and a seventh round. What are the picks in the middle? It's the, third, fourth, and fifth round. I grew up in the slam poetry area where you get 5 grades, you drop the high, you drop the low, and then you put everything in the middle. And so that's the way I used it for this one. I dropped the lows, I dropped the high. We're sticking with everything in the middle. And if we look at the mid-round picks from last year, third round picks, Vernon Broughton as well as Jonas Sanker. Now, Vernon Broughton, of course, is still jury's out, right? Didn't get to play at all during his rookie season, or got to play the one game during his rookie season, but then the hip injury ended his rookie year after just the second week of the season. And so too recent to evaluate and not enough time to evaluate, but he's a player that the Saints are very excited about. But the other 3 players, Jonas Sanker, third round pick, and then your pair of fourth round picks from last year, Danny Stutzman as well as Quincy Riley, those are guys that ended up being starters at 2 positions in your secondary, and another guy that's on the brink of being a starter as early and as soon as this season in Danny Stutzman, who quickly became a fan favorite and is a guy that you can see excitement that comes with a player like Danny Stutzman because of his leadership ability, his energy, all those other things. So there's a lot to like, obviously, about where the Saints sit there, but then it begged the question, how have they looked at that spot or in those spots from 2003 on? In the third, fourth, and fifth round. So the Saints have made a total of 64 selections from 2023 to 2025. And those are 64 selections that were made in rounds 3, 4, or 5. 2002 is when Mickey Loomis became the general manager, but it was in May of 2002. So his first draft class wasn't until 2003. And so I kind of broke these 64 players out into 3 buckets. I'll be sharing this with all of our all access members and everything after I'm done creating kind of the PDF of all of this. But basically the idea here is I created 3 different buckets, one of which is a bucket of players that have received postseason accolades within their career, and then separating that bucket out into sub buckets, if you will, buckets in which there is those that receive postseason accolades while with the Saints, and those who receive postseason accolades elsewhere, which you're going to notice that one of those groups trends more recent than the other. It's very interesting. So we'll go through that here in a moment. We'll also take a look at those that are consistent contributors, those that played more than 50% of snaps for multiple seasons in a New Orleans Saints uniform. I have some cleaning up to do in all of this one, but there's a few players here that I want to highlight. And then you have the busts and unknowns that come after that. And that's a long list. That is 40 of the 64 players right there. I'll tell you that right off the bat. Not all of them are because they're bust though. I have to put guys like Bub Means, Jalen Ford, Vernon Broughton, Jonas Sanker, Danny Stutzman, and Quincy Riley in this category because they fall into the unknown part of the category, right? And some players leave unknown. DeMarco Jackson left as an unknown, but turned out not to be a bust at all, considering how successful he just was in his year as a starter in Chicago, or mostly as a starter in Chicago. But then you look at other guys like the Nick Saldivaris of the world, the Vinny Sinceris of the world. Let's go all the way back to the Adrian McPhersons of the world, right? The guys that didn't even play a regular season game and all that. So there are those other players that are pretty clearly those that I'm calling them busts, but third, fourth, fifth rounds, you're not really calling these guys busts, right? Third, fourth, fifth rounds, you're lucky if they pan out, really. And so for this there's a lot more kind of busts / unknowns. And like I'm lumping guys like Spencer Rattler into unknown still because he became a starter in 2025, but that wasn't necessarily the expectation for him in the first place because he was a 5th round pick. So could I have actually put him in as a contributor? Yeah, maybe, but I kept him as an unknown because we don't know what his actual career trajectory looks like. Rick Leonard is a bust, right? Like, you see what I mean? Like, so there's some simple definitions to this as well. So for me, I found 11 players with postseason accolades, 13 that turned out to be solid contributors. I'm actually going to change that to 12 that became solid contributors. The reason why is because I put Al Woods, the 2010 4th round defensive tackle, as a solid contributor, but he was never a solid contributor for the Saints. Actually, he never even made the roster in New Orleans. He was drafted in April. By September, as a 4th round pick in 2010, he was already released. And I cannot stress how normal that was at that time, that you would draft 3rd, 4th, 5th round players and they wouldn't even make your active roster, let alone your practice squad or anything like that. Now, Al Woods went on to be an impactful player for the Seattle Seahawks and all these other, other spots that he made stops at. But so I have him in a category where he actually doesn't belong because he wasn't a solid contributor for the Saints. He was a solid contributor elsewhere. So really this number is 23 out of those 64 different ones. So just slightly over a third. That's good. That's actually good. If you think about it, when you go into a 7 round, like if you had 7 picks, 1 in each round, if you walked away with 2 contributors and a special teams contributor, that's a winning draft class. Like, that's a solid draft class for you. It's not going to win inside the league's best draft award, but that is a, hey, you achieved the thing kind of award, right? That's a, hey, that's better than the, hey, at least you tried cake, right? And so there's some understanding that has to be had here about what is actually a successful rate, and hitting on about a third of these players that end up being at least contributors for you. And even the players that went on to have postseason accolades elsewhere, with the exception of 1, they were all contributors for the Saints while they were here. So let's start with that category here, because I can hit every single player in this category pretty quickly. Postseason accolades: Jari Evans, Jermon Bushrod, Carl Nix, great offensive line draft picks that ended up contributing and getting postseason accolades while in New Orleans. Thomas Morstead, who was a 5th round pick in 2009, obviously still a player that the Saints are trying to replace, and they're hoping that Ryan Wright can come in and help them do that. Jimmy Graham, Teron Armstead, Alvin Kamara. Those are all the guys since 2003 that received postseason accolades in New Orleans. Those postseason accolades including end-of-year major awards, Offensive Rookie of the Year like Alvin Kamara in 2020 and 2017. All pros, I include first and second team because I think all pro is all pro, and then Pro Bowls as well. The 4 players that received those primarily with other teams: Akeem Hicks, right? Ended up getting that it was a second team All-Pro, I think it was, with Chicago, but was a contributor while in New Orleans. Trey Hendrickson made a Pro Bowl with the Bengals, was a contributor in New Orleans. CJ Gardner-Johnson also earned a Pro Bowl nod, if I remember correctly, with the Philadelphia Eagles. Also, though, a solid contributor in New Orleans. The one player that received a postseason accolade elsewhere that wasn't really a strong contributor in New Orleans was Zach Bond, but it's because of what the Saints were asking him to do. And of course, he was also a Defensive Player of the Year candidate there as well. Some of the standouts amongst the consistent contributors include Tyler Davison, PJ Williams, who I know wasn't exactly what everybody hoped that PJ Williams would be, but was a player that played and started at a lot of different positions. Paulson Adebo, David Onyemata, and then I just wanted to put this one in here: Mike Carney, baby. Good old fullback love here on Locked On Saints. All right, we're all about the fullbacks here. I got to move Al Woods, but the rest of the players, Garrett Graysons of the world, the Nick Toons of the world, they fall under bust, or at least unknowns for those that were too recent to have information on. But overall, over 30% hit rate on those 3rd, 4th, and 5th round picks, pretty solid. And the Saints sit with a 3rd, 2 4ths, and 2 5ths going into this year's draft. So we got that wrapped up for you here. Let's get to our next spot here, where we're going to take a look at what the Saints could potentially do with these 3rd, 4th, and 5th round picks, which is be active in the running back game. We'll get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide, so you can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar that you deserve while you get real-time notifications about your day. It's the relief of walking into a meeting with a real person and walking out knowing that your taxes will be handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints might have signed Travis Etienne Jr. They might still have Alvin Kamara under contract. They might still have some promising young potential at the running back position, but I don't think that's going to rule them out from being active in the running back market in this year's NFL draft. We appreciate you very much as always. Making us your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show. Make sure you come and check out the Everydayer Club. Our all access members going to get all that research, all the other stuff that I didn't talk about that's buried in here. This research about mid-round draft picks, all of our all access members are going to get that. So if you're looking for things like that and more, ad-free, Discord, all that kind of stuff, you can head over to lockedonsaints.supercast.com or click the link in the description to learn more. The Saints, I think, are still going to be active in the running back market in this year's NFL draft. Does that mean that they're going to draft a running back? No, not necessarily, right? And the reason why I mention that is because, you don't know what the teams ahead of them are going to do. You don't know what the teams behind them are going to do in terms of trading up and things like that. You don't know who's going to be on the board when the Saints are making selections, right? You might say, willing to draft a running back, but then all of a sudden, if there's a better wide receiver that's available at that spot, or a better corner, or a better defensive tackle, whatever that's available at the spot where you would otherwise have to take that running back, you're probably taking the better player as opposed to focusing on the position, because it's not necessarily a position of need. It's more of a position of Lagniappe, right? It's not luxury, right? Luxury picks. I just heard my guy Alex Clancy from Locked On Cardinals talk about this the other day. Luxury picks are like, hey, won a Super Bowl, appeared in a Super Bowl, made a late run into the playoffs, whatever. And drafting late in the first round, taking a running back, right? It's Patrick Mahomes saying, I want Clyde. Like that's the luxury pick. But drafting a running back in the mid rounds this year is a realistic possibility for New Orleans, and it's a worthwhile investment for New Orleans as well. So I highlight that as to say that I genuinely do believe that the Saints will be involved in the running back market. Now, who are some of the running backs that might tempt them and win? I think I would keep an eye out on Arkansas's Mike Washington in day 2, especially if he's there in the 3rd round. It's going to be a particularly hard player to pass up on just because of the wide range of skills that he has, the wide range of skill sets that he has, the variety of things that he has the ability to do, the way that he can impact your game, all of that. I think Jonah Coleman is a guy that is being looked at by the public and by media and by analysts in a way that's doesn't equate to the excitement that teams feel about him out of Washington. He's another player that I'd watch out for. Emmett Johnson is not the most aesthetically pleasing from an outside run perspective, but is a bulldozer of a running back and is a physical, I should probably say, running back in the middle of an offensive line that could complement a guy like Travis Etienne, who's under contract not just for this year, but at least for next year. He's got a 4-year deal, though, but the 4-year deal is kind of structured like a 2-year deal. And so really what you're looking for is how do you build around him for your future at the running back position, in addition to what you might be able to do with Alvin Kamara. I don't think that things are foundationally steady enough when it comes to the Alvin Kamara piece of this equation for the Saints to avoid the running back position as a whole, as if it's not a position that they might not need, because they could create their need there. They could go into the draft, take a young running back that they're really excited about, that they feel like can do something in Kellen Moore's system, so on and so forth. And then based on that, go and make their decision around Alvin Kamara. I think that's a likely scenario, but the draft has to fall the right way for the Saints to truly be able to live out that, potential. There's a big difference between going into the draft and saying, okay, wait and see what happens, and then walking away with no running backs, versus going in and saying, okay, actively pursuing a running back, and then if you land the running back that you're looking for, then making that decision. And I think the latter is what it is that the Saints are trying to do. The former is what they're trying to avoid going into this one. And so the Saints' opportunity here is massive in front of them in terms of running backs they could potentially go out and get. I didn't even name all the running backs that I like, right? There's the other Notre Dame running back in Jadarian Price, who's not the other when it comes to talent. Jeremiah Love at 8. I don't think the Saints are going to go for, but if the board goes, catastrophic for them over the course of the first 7 picks or something, and then all of a sudden Jeremiah Love's the best player available on the board, I don't think you turn your nose up at it either. Things would just have to go a very specific way. I don't think the Saints are going non-premium within the first 8 picks, though. But beyond that, real opportunity for the Saints to continue to build up that running back room and continue to build their run game, which is a big focus for them going into the offseason. They got faster. They got stronger on the offensive line by adding David Edwards, and they got better as a run game by adding both David Edwards and Travis Etienne, and from a bit of a sleeper extent, Noah Fant as well, who's a better blocker than people give him credit for. And so seeing the Saints go after a running back and seeing the Saints go after another blocking tight end in the 2026 NFL draft, both of those scenarios make a ton of sense for me as a team that's trying to take steps forward in its run game, and then they'll make some of their more long-term decisions after the draft. All right, family, time for a little bit of Lagniappe. For the real ones that made it to this point in the episode, the Saints are going to be among the teams that I think should be looking to mobilize and trade around in this year's NFL draft. I think I'm of the minority in this opinion, but if the Saints see a prospect that they really want that's available on the board at 68, don't wait until 73. Go and get that player. If the Saints see a player that they really, really like on the board at 34, don't wait until 42. Go and get that player. Although I will say sticking and picking at 8 is the, without a doubt, most logical thing to do. The Saints played the draft perfectly last year, sitting and letting the draft come to them. They they utilize patience all throughout. They display patience all throughout. And that will now allow them to be more aggressive this year, if the situation is right. I'm not saying just go out there and trade willy-nilly and then see who's on the board, right? You don't sit there with your eyes covered over the course of the entire draft and say, trade me up to 34, and then open your eyes and then go, okay, who's on the board, right? You're trading with a player in mind that you're going to go after, and you're trying to ensure the difference between moving up and getting the better player or sticking and not getting the better player. And I think that's what you're trying to avoid. The Saints played the draft really, really well last year, letting everything come to them and kind of just going best player available. Although there were some players that we knew that they liked, Kelvin Banks Jr. and Tyler Shuck in particular, we knew that was a direction that they wanted to go. And so or could accurately predict, let me say it that way, that was a direction that they would want to go. So with that in mind, I don't think the Saints have to play it the same way this year. I think they should mobilize. I think they should trade. I think they should be aggressive. I think they should go after the players that are going to have an impact. I think the idea that they need more players is a bit outdated now. I think the idea now is that they need the players, not more players, the players. And if they're moving around to go and get the most surefire options, move around and go and get the most surefire options. This is going to be a very trade active draft. Everything that I've heard and everything that people have heard about this draft class is that it doesn't have the day 3 depth of other draft classes, and therefore rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4 are going to be very active in terms of teams trying to get ahead of that day 3 drop off by trading up into round 4. And the Saints have the fodder to be able to do that. They've got 2 5th-round picks, and they have a 6th-round pick. They also have 2 4th-round picks, 132, 136, 150, 172, 190. They could use that to move around just outside of that top 100 and put themselves into more opportunities within the top 150. I think it's a good way for them to go in this year's draft. All right, family, coming up in tomorrow's episode, a look at some of the surprise selections that could happen at number 8 overall. You know, you always got to be ready for the unexpected. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation, I'll holla at you.